Jerry might need to turn. Yeah.
Everybody. I mean,
So I
okay.
want to welcome everybody.
Well, maybe that's good.
Yeah, good.
I want to welcome everybody and say that about 25 years ago, I was at Isabella Friedman, or did we meet at the Old Eilat Chaim? So even longer, 30
Yes.
years ago,
Maybe
we
not
were
that
at a now defunct place, may it rest in peace, the Old Eilat Chaim in Accord, New York.
Yeah.
And Judy was teaching yoga. I was a participant or an intern. And I just thought she was of a different world almost. Like she was one with the energies, let's say. And then I came across her again. I loved her class. Then I came across her again a few years later at Camp Isabella Friedman in the Berkshires. Again, she was teaching yoga.
Yeah.
This time she wasn't feeling so well. And by that time I was a yoga teacher. So I said, you go take care of yourself. And I just said, I'll teach. I just jumped in and taught.
And I went into the bathroom and threw up.
Fast forward, I become rabbi at this shul.
Yeah.
And who comes in but Judy? And over the years, I've gotten to know you better. And I
Yeah.
never would have dreamed of all the stories that you had. So one day I'm
Yeah.
taking a walk in Upper Bucks County and the idea pops into my head, Judy should really tell her story. So I call her, she's in California visiting. Would you
Kids.
tell your story? Yes, but I think I might want someone to help ask me questions. And then boom, David Stoller.
Of course.
He has his own podcast. He organizes incredible programming like crazy. So I'm so delighted that the two of you agreed to this day. And I want to thank Jerry over there, who's helping on tech, and Andy, who helped set this up. And I think Steve gave a little bit of advice as well. So for everyone who helped make this happen, thank you. And can you hear? Can you give a thumbs up if you heard what I said? Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
take it away.
All
Can you
right.
see us? Oh,
So,
Hello.
well, welcome everybody. And I'm thrilled that the rabbi asked me to interview my good buddy, Judy. And it's great for the temple to be hosting this as part of our adult ed. You know, it's really a privilege to interview you. We've had many breakfasts together that included contests for who could peel a tangerine without
breaking the
breaking
skin, making a nice oval.
and I think it came out as a tie. But I'm honored to interview Judy, this extraordinary young woman who is now entering her 9th decade. So yes, and looking marvelous and
Feeling decent.
feeling decent. So Judy, this is your life in front of friends and on Zoom, which include family members. So I'd like to begin this by asking you, how do you feel? What do you think in this moment?
In this moment, actually, pretty good. I mean, we've gone over things, and thanks, I mean, Jerry and David doing so much stuff and figuring out sequences and stuff like that. And, you know, it's amazing because everybody's got a unique life. Every single human being on this planet has a unique life. Never repeated in any way, even identical twins that are, you know, but I've been really lucky. Also greedy, but also really lucky to have been able to fulfill stuff that I wanted to do that was pretty far out, and stuff that I never expected I would be doing. That's
And so we're going to get into that. But first, Judy, your outfit is spectacular. You
well,
want to explain the symbolism of different stuff here?
yes. Well, my outfit is overalls. Now, I realized when I was pregnant with one of the kids that what I really didn't want was a waistband, and I started wearing Mark's overalls. And I went like, this is fabulous. This is really fabulous. And then we went to different, Slow Foods has wonderful international things with people from all over the world, at Terra Madre, Mother Earth. And we went to several of them. And everybody came, you know, a Tibetan person in their outfit, and you know, a person from South America wearing their native dress. I started coming to them too.
Perfect. Perfect.
So this is my native dress. And
You're wearing another ornament too.
I'm wearing something which I'm really proud to be wearing. These earrings, which, you know, I don't know close up if you can get, but the people here can. They are made out of the wing bone of a bat. And in Papua New Guinea, people use things for dressing up. So, I mean, but it's all things from nature. So these actually, they're a little different from when I first got them. And the stories about this is that it's wing bone of a bat, but there were some sort of brown little round things hanging from it. And I said to the woman who was wearing them originally, what are they? What's that? And she gives me the roll-eyed look. So I said, really, what are they? And she says, hoa. And I'm like, hoa. Oh yeah, the word for meat, but the particular word also for possum. And from that, I understood that the little round things hanging as a decoration on her earrings were possum testicles. And that I realized from the look she gave me, which translated could be, you're a married woman, why can't you recognize this? So that's the story. And I, you know, I thought that you would like to, and you can look at, but I don't have the decoration anymore. I feel a little sorry that I didn't save them.
No, you can always go back. So, okay.
We'll switch. Okay,
Is that good?
we can't see us.
Yeah, but they can.
Okay,
So there's a lot in this life to squeeze in 60 minutes. So I thought a useful construct would be provided by a marvelous anthropologist named Barbara Meyerhoff, who wrote a book, Number Our Days, which if you haven't read it is fabulous. And in it, she talks about people should be living anthropologically, she called it. And in Judy's case, it's anthropologically and spiritually, and that's what we're going to talk about. But very specifically, she said a good anthropologist has 3 births. The first birth is where they grew up and their family and their childhood and their early days. The second birth is when something extraordinary happens, where they're taken way out of their life that they've known and have an experience as an anthropologist where a field guide to a different world entirely, which is totally apt for Judy. And then the third birth is when you come back into your old life, but you come back changed and you have different idea about your life and what is important to you. So I'm going to use that as the construct and begin right now with your background and your growing up. And
well, as I said in the thing, I'm a South Philly girl because I was born in South Philly, living with grandparents and certain aunts and uncles. So, I mean, in those days, you know, people didn't have a lot of money, and we lived in this double house with lots of relatives. And it was a really happy home. It was wonderful and loving. And with my parents, grandparents, and I have a little brother who's a year and a half younger than I am. I refer to him as my dumb little brother, but that's not completely true. He's quite bright. But we have been almost like twins. And so growing up really, really close to somebody else for your whole life. And one of the things that I realized in thinking about it was that later on, we're talking about spiritual stuff. And one of the big things about meditation or doing spiritual work is to observe what you're doing, be the observer. And one of the things you're observe is that you're observing your mind. And I have observed that when I'm trying to figure out something, the form I take is in a conversation. And originally that conversation was with Alan. Through much of my growing up, I would work out stuff, anything, any question of anything or experience. What did you think of that? I mean, always in conversation with Alan. And that's something that,
And Alan's on, of course.
and Alan is there with his boss. No. But anyway, yeah, that when you think about formative things in your life that carry through your whole life, if you're looking back, that
How
was
special
definitely-
that is.
yeah, how special that is, that the wonderful relationship, but also the formative things of, you know, how your mind works.
And how about, so your parents, were they originally here? Were they the result of immigrants from some East European?
Yes, my parents, my mother's parents came from Romania. They had lots of kids, and my mother was the youngest of 8 children, and they lived eventually in the Catskills. And they had, my grandfather had to get out of New York because he had a heart condition, and they lived on the Lower East Side, and basically it's like, get out of New York, you got 8 kids, and they moved to a house in the Catskills that eventually, it was a big house, and then they had a rooming house, and then everybody else, you know, was making hotels up there, and Grossinger's is 3 miles away. And basically, they had a house, and they had a rooming house, and then eventually built a little hotel called the Grand Hotel. And that was a pretty formative experience too, because we went up there like once, 1 week or 1 or 2 weeks every year. But then Alan and I worked there every summer, you know, I was the athletic director one time. Everybody out for volleyball in 15 minutes.
So, and growing up, I assume your grandparents were religious? Or-
Oh, my mother's parents were religious. My mother's father died before I was born, but they were Orthodox, but my grandparents on my father's side were not. And they came to this country from Ukraine, basically, and they came younger and they met here. And he wasn't raised very religious. He was one of 4 kids. But we were definitely Jewish.
Right.
But we didn't practice that much in the house because my father wasn't interested in
So you went holidays in the house, Pesach.
Oh, yeah, all of that stuff. And we
Were you
visited
bat mitzvahed?
relatives. I was bat mitzvahed when I was, I think, about 35, because I decided, or maybe older, 40, at a certain point, I decided I know more about Hinduism, Buddhism, and all this other stuff that I'd studied, because at a certain point I studied yoga. And then I said, hey, this stuff really works. And so let me investigate it more. And I went, it was Integral Yoga Institute in New York. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. And Satchidananda was the teacher. And it really worked, the practice. So, and I went for the really spiritual reason. I was working in a sheltered workshop in the Bronx, and I was kind of getting pear-shaped. So I said, well, I better do some exercise. And yoga will be better than, you know, my friend was doing karate, and that wasn't my type of thing. And it really worked. You'd go in exhausted and you'd come out feeling good and not even hungry. And so I investigated and went to a lecture, and he said, the brightest, I called a girlfriend of mine, and I remember it because I called her up and I said, you know, 3 years of graduate school, and I have heard the smartest thing I've ever heard. He said, you people don't know about love. You say I love you, and you cock your ear to hear I love you back. He said, that's not love, that's business. And that blew my mind. And that got me listening to more lectures and getting more involved and learning Vedanta. So he was an excellent teacher. But
How does that lead into you
That-
getting bat mitzvah?
well, the thing is that I'm a very intellectual type. I'm not someone who's just like the bhakti yoga, the prayers. I'm really so I started to go to a different teacher also who was extremely wonderful teacher, crisp teacher of Vedanta, and very funny too, Chinmayananda. But then originally, when we came back from New Guinea, we announced to everybody, you know what? The Cold War is going on. We've got a lot of interesting things to do in life. We're not having any children. But you get a little older and you start to say, kids. And I'm in my early 30s and I go, I think I might want to have kids. And at a certain point, when we had them, it was like, wait, I'm not going to raise Hindu kids. And I know 10 times more about Hinduism than Judaism. I better investigate Judaism a little more, because I had thrown it out when I was about 15. Because what image of reality were most of us raised with, people my age? Big Daddy the string puller, who's going to give you a treat if you do well and smack if you don't. And that's the version of reality. And this intellect said, that can't be reality. That can't be what it really is. But I won't be an agnostic, because what do I know? So basically, I left Judaism for a long time, but then I had kids. And I said, wait a minute, I want to raise Jewish kids. I'm not going to raise Hindu kids. And I don't want to raise kids with nothing, because I've had friends who've done that and they don't have, there's a flavor. To all religions, there's a flavor. And I've had friends who were raised with, nothing, and they haven't experienced the flavor and the community too. There's something about that too. And so I asked a rabbi friend of Mark's, so where do I start going to learn Judaism? And he said, Germantown Jewish Center in Mount Airy. There's this guy, Art Green. There's Art Wasco. There's Salman Schachter. Go down there. And you know what was going on there? It's like we read about Safat years and years. This Jewish renewal. And I mean, I was in the right place.
All right, so you are getting a little ahead of me, but which is okay, because it's all okay. But so talk about, before we go to your more exotic forays, what experiences, in addition to conversations with your brother, which I love that, lifelong, what do you recall that really affected you profoundly as a kid?
Okay, well, as a kid, my father, fabulous human being, fabulous. So we're sitting out on the front porch in South Jersey, where we lived at that point, and we're looking at the stars. You could actually see them at that time. And I'm about 15, and I say, okay, it keeps going, okay, where's the end of it all? The edge, the outer edge of all these stars. And he says, oh, it keeps going. And I'm like, and what about, when did it start? When did it end? No, there's no start. And basically starts telling me about infinity, which nobody can really get. I wanted to get it. And I got so annoyed that I can still see myself saying, okay, fine. Closing, coming into the house, passing a mirror and seeing myself as I pass by, very annoyed, and saying, I have this wonderful family, but if I were to get able to go on a rocket ship and never come back, but get the answers to all of this, I'd go. Years later, I'm sitting listening to, I think it was Satchidananda teaching, and I went, I'm on the rocket ship. So that experience of with my father, I I see that it was the first spark of what? Being on the spiritual quest.
Okay, so now you've graduated high school. Jerry, do you have that fabulous high school photo?
Do.
It sort of looks like all of ours,
I wonder why.
but while you're finding it, so, huh?
Yeah, or,
So you go on to college,
yeah,
go to Penn,
yeah.
which was my alma mater as well. And you study,
Anthropology. And I study anthropology because it's really interesting. Also, at a certain point, I realized, and one of the reasons I got interested is that, there's the kid.
there she is.
Yeah, 1950s.
Yeah, that's 1959.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I realized that what I really wanted to do, the person who wants to get on the rocket ship wants to taste as much of this experience of life. I mean, it's like ingredients. I want it all. I want to taste it all. I want to experience it all. And I would really love to, just travel by myself. People were beginning to do that, get on the road, travel, and get on some boat going across the Pacific or, whatever. But in those days, a girl by herself doing that, no way. Culturally, I mean, no way. So basically I thought, okay, if I become an anthropologist, I'll have I'll have a whole structure to be able
Right,
to
the
do
ticket.
that. I have the ticket. And so studied anthropology. And at that time at Penn, which is a great place to study anthropology, I mean, one of the core places. And of course that museum, which I recommend to everyone.
Fabulous.
There were only 24 people in the majoring in anthro then. When my son Jesse was majoring in anthro and classics, that's Jesse, anthro and double major at Penn many a year later, there were, I think, 600 people graduating in anthropology at that time. So who's going to get a job in that? I didn't want to get a job so I studied anthropology. At the end of the time there, with another thing of, crisscrosses that just happened by chance or a nudge, we don't know. I got to know one of the other people who was in my class, but who was a very sort of dour person and didn't socialize much. But I got to know him, and he was also an anthro student. He was going to go into the Peace Corps, but right around graduation, we started to get to know each other. Mark Dornstreich, anthropology major. And so we started going out together, and then he went off to Syria in the Peace Corps, deferred admission to Columbia in anthropology. And I was going to go to teachers college to become a counseling psychologist because I knew I didn't want to be an anthropologist and I needed a profession. One of the things I realized at a certain point, just saying for all the granddaughters here, I realized that as a woman, I needed a profession because people, get married, but then they get divorced. And if I was going to have kids, I wanted to be able to support them and not necessarily depend on nagging someone for child support. So I had to get a profession. So counseling psychology, and I was in New York. And Mark decided he didn't want to stay in Syria. So he came back, moved to New York, and studied anthropology. And when it got time for him getting a PhD, to figure out, was he going to go to a place like Syria and do archaeology, because he had a few grants. And but then he also had a Fulbright and to the ANU, and because the idea was maybe we would possibly choose to go to New Guinea.
You're not married yet, or you are?
We had gotten married.
Married picture,
Right.
which is pretty good. I like this. Mark, he looks a little skeptical about
And not just, and we didn't want a big wedding. So, Alan was there, but, and the parents were there, but yeah. We sort of got married because we knew we were going to go into the field together, and there was no way just living together in those days, 1967 to 69, that an unmarried couple could travel around the world.
let
there was
alone live together.
that was an issue, eventually when my Aunt Gertie said to my mother, Judy doesn't really need her own dorm room because I call her all the time at Mark's, and it was like, okay, that's
Okay, so
we're at Columbia. We have to decide where we're going to go. It takes us 35 minutes to decide to go to Papua New Guinea, which we know is going to be more far out to go. And the idea was, he was mainly interested in archaeology, that an archaeologist is always digging up something, but doesn't really know what it was, and then inferring what it was used for. Let's go to a really as primitive a place as we can go and see what they're using and see what remains would be left, but we would know how they used those. The trouble was, we chose to go to the rainforest, where things do not remain, very few things remain. And we got to realize that most of the things they were using would not be found. And therefore, we better do something else. So we started to measure everything that they ate. And because the theory was that people become cannibals, these people were not cannibals. No, those people over there, but us never.
You're being facetious here.
They said they said they don't eat people. And we were allowed to go to this group because they had been contacted. We were trying to go to some other place, and finally the administration said, no, you can't go there because we haven't really pacified them. But these people, okay, you can go there. So we started to measure everything that they ate in the communal. It was a very small group of people, about 20 people, 25 people living communally. And then there were bush houses as well. And the nearest other group was a day's walk away.
But you were doing this to confirm or disprove the idea that they were eating human beings?
No,
for
it was
protein?
just to say, are they actually short of protein? Because that was what everybody thought. And by our measuring everything, and I will in a minute give you an example, but measuring everything that went into the place, and then Mark running around after people as soon as they went into the bush.
This was his PhD work, right?
Yes, at Columbia. He'd run into he'd follow people around and see what they were eating in the bush. And basically what we found in some was they were not short of protein. They were short of fat. So if you kill a pig in the forest and then everybody shares the pig, and then it's amazing because somebody's holding up the fat from the pig and people are sharing that, And I was not a vegetarian at that point, nor keeping kosher, so it didn't matter. But so, okay, here's a good example of weighing things. So we had several different scales that we brought up, and a woman comes with something wrapped in about this size, wrapped in leaves, in a leaf packet. And I said, Shalomli, so what's that? What do you got in there? And she said, homu. And I said, homu? That means spider. So I said, really? she opens it up a little bit, and there is a big, hairy tarantula leg. And basically, I have always been a little bit scared of spiders. And I went, and so here's the picture of the woman in the grass skirt chasing the anthropologist around the hamlet with a spider in her hand that she's going to roast and eat. And I did not taste. You know, there's some limits about it.
So you weren't trading recipes?
Well, I mean, I would watch what they did with everything. So I know all the recipes. They're pretty simple when you've got a fireplace and cooking over stone.
Now you, in the course of this, you actually found out what it meant to be hungry and possibly cannibalistic.
Yes, I did. Because, as I said, the people were a day's walk away, the hamlets a day's walk away, and there was going to be a housewarming, and Mark could make it in one day. I needed 2 days walking. You know, it's like, 2 days walking, let's stop at a bush house halfway. And they were up higher towards, these were not too far from the Karawari, this group of people, but up the highlands. They were on the way to the highlands. And so we went up there because there was a housewarming. And we brought a lot of our own food up river so that we could trade for things like carbohydrates, but we didn't want to influence. We were measuring, we didn't want to take stuff that, so we, like, if they went off to eat a snake somewhere or a python, which by the way is delicious.
We'll take your word for it.
Thank you. It is. Tastes like chicken.
Of course.
But we brought our own like little tins of tuna fish and stuff like that, so we wouldn't have to depend on them too much. But we would trade for certain things, trade tobacco and salt, things that wouldn't really change their life. And because they did smoke and trade for their own tobacco downriver. So basically, wait, where was I?
We're going to hunger.
Oh, the hunger thing. Right. So we're going to Kambodowa, and we didn't bring a bunch of our stuff. We brought stuff but because it's a 2-day walk away. So we didn't bring stuff, and they thought we did, and they didn't feed us. And, just a few little things, and we were hungry. Now, I don't know if you've ever been, how people, oh, I'm starved. 5 days of not having enough to eat, and you begin to realize what being hungry means. And we weren't quite starved yet. All there is on the screen is food. That's all Mark and I were talking about, was food and da-da-da. So at a certain point, he stood up in the men's section of the house and did a rant. We came and we brought you Bruce, and we brought you tobacco, and we brought you salt, and we brought you this and that, and we're hungry. That's all we had to say. And then came the event slightly afterwards, which was a big eel that was cooked, and we ate amongst other things. And Mark, he filleted that for me too. It was nice.
Romantic.
It's so romantic, yes. Eating an eel in New Guinea, and it was good. But I do think that some of the seeds of my being a vegetarian may have been planted there. What I realized in terms of hunger and that experience was that I really would not kill a person. I will not kill a person and then eat them. But if that person was already dead and I was hungry enough, I would.
An amazing admission from Judy.
I would.
Yeah.
you know, and why but I wouldn't kill somebody.
But you saw how desperately you can feel.
I mean, nothing else on the screen, man. And if that eel didn't happen, and not
Me?
you're my friend. No.
Don't look at me that way. Okay, so you're living with these people and you're doing field work, which is basically measuring what they eat.
Mhm.
What were you learning? What struck you about them that you carried forward when you left?
And this is a good question. One time, an example is watching a woman standing at the edge. They always lived on little hilltops and cleared the hilltops so you could sort of see if anybody was coming up a trail. There's sort of a traditional defense sort of way to live. And she's standing there and she's chanting at the edge of looking over the rainforest and saying, oh, there are couples here, there's meat here, there's pandanus, one of my favorite things in the world to eat. And there's pandanus, there's this, there's that. And she was kind of chanting to the world around her, but I also realized that she was part of it. They were a part of this world. They weren't someone who says, you know, let's go to the deli and get something to eat. They were people who everything that they consumed, everything that they used, they knew how to make. Every single thing. You know, how you gonna, you know, decorate your ears? You kill the bat. When you get the bat, and then you eat everything of the bat that you can eat, and then you save the bone and look. Or you get dressed up. So you take a piece of bamboo, and it's a narrow piece, and you make a hole in your septum or in your ears, and you put a thin bamboo, and then at a certain point you make it a thicker piece until you can take it thick enough. So maybe you put 2 bat bones at the ends of it with feathers, and then as you walk, the feathers you're bouncing, and that's, you know, that's part of your jewelry. And it was also, I did realize that it was time to go home when I'm sitting with someone and she's cleaning her nose piece, and I think to myself, that kind of looks good. I recognize that thought, and I go, time to go home, Judy.
So,
time to go home.
Which is probably a good transition point, but let me ask, was there any interest on your part, or did you find anything out about their religious or spiritual or mythology, or was that part of? At
that time, I'm completely not interested in religious stuff. We weren't. And so there was enough else. I mean, these people were in the Stone Age using stone tools, and
but they were part of their creation. So that was
right.
Sort of this.
But we weren't interested in what their world view was. We did learn the language pretty well. I mean, there's Pidgin English, which is a lingua franca in New Guinea because there's so many different languages. So we learned Pidgin. 2 people were married into the group, and they married into the group and spoke Pidgin. So they were our interpreters. And little by little, we learned Gadioanga, you know, decently enough to say, he didn't say that. You're, you know, to the interpreter. He didn't actually say that. You know, you're making it too concise because you don't feel like translating.
So you're about ready to leave. The nose thing really did it for you.
Well, it made me understand.
Key, your buddy there, which
who
and I'll tell you a special friendship with.
Well, one of the interpreters
there is
Kosioko.
There's Judy.
And there's Kosioko. Now, Kosioko, fabulous human being. He was from a nearby place. He married into the group. So he marries this young woman, Ayaba. Ayaba was, I'd say about 14, and she was a pistol. very bright, very intense and delightful. And I would say he was about 30 or something at the time. So I'm sitting at we had this little, hut type house, and it has a little desk that we built, and there wasn't any computer or anything. I'm writing notes and stuff, and I'm looking out the cutout window, which happened to be looked out on where the top of one of the trails down river was, down to the little stream down below. So they're having an argument. He's standing on a log, feet, toes curled over the log, and he's yelling, and she's answering him, and her voice gets fainter and fainter as she's going down the hill, until her voice, she gets the last word, is extremely faint, and the anthropologist sees Kosioko go, do I need to translate that to anyone?
We have a similar gesture.
All over the world. And I went, the oneness of human beings. He's so annoyed at her. He gets the last word. So,
All right.
there it is.
You've had this extraordinary experience, and you're now coming back home.
Yes.
And you stop in India.
Well, actually, we went to Singapore. We stopped in several places on the way home, and one was India. This is someone who, is not religious at all.
Right.
But
and you actually haven't started studying?
I hadn't started studying yoga yet,
right, so
either. So, but we're India and Nepal on that trip, and basically, I had some desire to go to Benares. Now I have been told later, I don't know if there's reincarnation. If anybody has proof, could you please tell me? But I would like proof or something that I can really know that that's what happens, or one of the things, could be one of the things that happens after you die. It doesn't have to be just one thing. But I had this desire to go to Benares. So we go to Benares. And that was one of the places we went. Also, I didn't mention to you, we did go to Nepal, which was a fairly transitional experience for me because I hadn't smoked any dope for 2 years. And I was like, okay, it's legal here. And okay, you buy some and you pop some candy in your mouth, and then and Mark never smoked anything. And you're in the bed next to him in the $1 a night place, and you smoke some, and then you realize he's high from the exhaled smoke of the 3 puffs I took. What am I? And this actually, so I turned my attention inward. Nobody even said anything about turn your attention inward before, because I hadn't studied any yoga. Turn my attention inward, and there is nothing there except my awareness. If this was now, I'd go, yeah. Okay, I'm there in oneness, in just plain awareness. And I was totally unprepared, freaked out, didn't smoke anything for 2 years after that. I was so freaked out. And however, there was something in experience. And also, Mark started to talk about stuff that he had sort of buried. And it was an interesting experience, but I think another seed. I mean, there was a lot of seeds for future life planted. And one was, okay, then you start taking yoga classes because of being pear-shaped, and they really work. And then you learn more, and then they're telling you to do what you did in Nepal, except that you were unprepared to. And now they're telling you not to do it with help, to learn how to do it on your own. That's the difference. Oh, and it's harder.
All right. So in the interest of time, I think, So you're back.
We're
and You're
back.
back in
New York.
New York,
Mhm.
and
And Mark is getting a PhD at Columbia, taking forever to do it, to write all this stuff up because he was a very meticulous person and we had a lot of notes. And I'm working in sheltered workshop as a counseling psychologist, a wonderful one in the Bronx, and coming home, getting pear-shaped, being exhausted. And I decide, I'll try yoga as exercise. And what those classes are really, really good. And then I started to go and learn about it.
Right.
And it was mind-blowing. And one little story is that, and I'm in my 30s, at one point when I was a teenager, my mother went to Israel and she came back with this, what this is, it's just a teeny little Torah. And she said, would you like this? And I said, I'm not going to wear any religious amulets. 20 years later, on my 40th birthday, she holds this up and says, would you like this? And I said, where did you get that? And she said, you don't remember, huh? And an example of how you can change through the course of your life. What happened was I had all these kids. I wanted to, they were definitely going to learn yoga, or not yoga. They were going to learn all this stuff. Yeah, do some of the stuff, but they were raised with the philosophy of it. They were also raised with people who had been in New Guinea, had lived in the Stone Age without a lot of stuff. And, it's not so great for a bunch of kids to have parents who basically want to say, what do you want that? What, a Cabbage Patch doll, $65 for a doll? I could have bought a wife for that, for less than that. Are you nuts? We had these varied experiences and was sometimes not that easy for the kids.
So you're starting kids in 75 with.
Okay.
So your first kid in 1975.
Right.
Elijah.
And what had happened was that, Mark got his PhD from Columbia, wound up teaching at Rutgers, and at a certain point said, I don't think I want to teach for the rest of my life. You're talking about somebody else's, you're teaching anthropology, you're talking about somebody else's experience. It's secondhand experience. You're talking to a bunch of kids. There's a few sitting up front who are paying attention. And thank you, people. There's no one on your iPhones, but there was no iPhones. They're passing notes, they're they're not paying attention. And he said, what am I doing? And we had been used to, in New Guinea, the seeds of having direct experience, not talking about what somebody else is doing. And he said, I don't think I want to teach the rest of my life. And I said, so what do you think you want to do? Oxford. He said, I think I want to grow vegetables. I'm like, wait, you're from Queens. What? Where did that come from? No. But the thing is, the seeds were planted in New Guinea of working direct, being in nature and one with nature is fabulous. And I was like that as a kid. Up in the Catskills, when I can remember being like 8 years old, lying in a meadow, looking at all the details and being enchanted by all the details of all the different kinds of plants there were in just this little thing in front of my eyes. So
this wasn't a big leap for you?
The thing was, I was good at being a counseling psychologist. I really enjoyed it, but Indian word swadharma. It wasn't my essence focused purpose in life. And so basically it was like, okay, I love nature. Let's do that. Let's grow. So we became apprentices on different farms for a while to learn how to do it. And first child, Elijah, was born while we were apprentices in the first place.
Jerry, Elijah, Judy. So you were apprentices in 75,
Right,
and then you bought
the farm in
you're on,
78.
78.
So we did several different things in between, and Mark was actually teaching. There's Lige being fed strawberries. We're at the right.
So cute.
So cute. You see how red he is on his clothes? That's because he wasn't so neat at eating strawberries. So,
Okay,
yeah,
so 78,
so
you
we,
have a farm.
okay, so we find this farm. And one of the reasons we were interested in the people who had the farm before had never used chemicals on it. So, and we didn't really realize this, that when something's, it's got a creek and farmland on either side, we didn't really understand what floodplain meant, but it did mean that it did flood occasionally, that little east branch of the Perkasie. I mean, it's a little nothing thing. But I want to tell you something. There's the thing now known as global warming. The floods weren't anything like what they are now. I mean, we had floods. They did a lot of damage. They would wipe things out. We would plant things in certain ways that we knew would be safe. We made some levees so that it kept we did a whole lot of stuff, but bad floods happen, but not like they do now. And
Jerry, Mark and Judy as farmers. And then Judy on her,
yeah,
not tractor, what are you on?
mower.
Your mower. Okay. There is, they look like, on a kibbutz in Israel. There you are.
Yeah. And
That's-
kale. Yes, that's the farmers on one of the levees. I mean, that's in the front field, one of the one, and where the trees are is at the edge of the creek. And it's, there's a way for the small flood, medium floods to get around and not go over those gardens. Since then, they have gone over the gardens, but not at this time.
So, and you, as time went on, you became more and more focused on a particular kind of produce.
Right. So one of the things, again, little things that happen. Eliza Green is somebody we know who's one of the chefs in Philadelphia, but I mean, we started to bring stuff, we started to sell stuff by the side of the road, and little by little, it went into somebody else we knew needed some produce, needed some time. He didn't have enough THYMA time. And so we knew that was another farmer because he was selling to restaurants in Philadelphia. So I gave him this like quarter pound of time and gives me $10. He was going to give me the retail price. And, the light bulb, we could be growing this. Oh, what about selling to things in Philadelphia? And another point, we had one greenhouse where we were starting plants, and we were transplanting from a smaller patch to, and I guess it was arugula or something, transplanting little starts. And the guy who was our apprentice, we were transplanting, and you break something off accidentally, pop it in your mouth. Oh, that baby fennel is delicious. Light bulb, micro greens, and micro vegetables. How about a baby carrot this big with live greens attached to it? So these chefs, and you've got, so Patrick Fury.
The biggest chef, Patrick Fury, kissing Mark.
Right. Okay, so the Fury brothers who had, and so Patrick, when he was a chef at Nectar on the main line, there he is later on, a sweet human being, delightful. He would take baby carrots, with their greens attached, he would plunge them in boiling water to soften them up. And they're cleaned. Plunge them in boiling water. Hold on to the greens, plunge it in tempura batter. Plunge it into oil, still holding it. And then what you get is a tempura baby carrot with live greens. And that rests on top of your salad or whatever. And you know, you're in a fancy restaurant, you're charging $10 for the salad, and it's garnished with that. So at one point, I realized we were growing artist materials. And we would
And you became the leading supplier of
one
this
of
kind
them.
process.
And the guy, Paul, who we bought the time with, I mean, it felt bad. We tried not to sell to the same places and, you know, because we didn't want to like, we were bigger than he was and he was growing herbs, but we started growing herbs and lots of herbs and baby, you know, and there's Jesse one time, you know, there's bunches of chives and they're flowering and Jesse walks by and says, "Mom, that chive flower is delicious." Light bulb, edible flowers. So, you know, all of a sudden there's, you know, not only nasturtiums, but all sorts of snapdragons are edible. There's just all sorts of stuff.
So in your farming,
Yeah.
because we promised spiritual musings
Oh, right.
of a Jewish farmer, right?
Right.
You had this sort of revelation with the peas.
Oh, yeah. Well, before that, even though one of the reasons for being it is to be a part of the, you know, there was something about being a part of the whole. But I had an experience one time that was significant. And one of the things about Eastern teaching, and Judaism talks about this too. I mean, we are being the I am that we are, that is encapsulated with a mind, with a first with physical body, but we also have emotional equipment. It's equipment and an intellect. And there's this thing behind that in a way that is just the one that is able to watch it all. And I'm out picking peas. They're on trellis, sort of tied up on trellises, and I'm in a row of peas, and I am so angry. I was blown away with anger because our beautiful Mark's best friend, Dito, who had a transition from Latvia as a child through German displaced people's camp to, you know, finally winding up being our friend. And I'd never met his younger brother, Jesse, but that family had gone through so much. And Jesse was on River Road, motorcycle, from 1 minute to the next. And I was just enraged because it's like stepping on a bug. He's alive 1 minute, you know, no fair. And I'm picking peas and ranting. And at a certain point, now you're in the farm. First of all, you're breathing air. You're breathing the exhalation that the plant is giving you. You're surrounded by these plants. You're in your body and you have to pay attention. So your mind is focused on what you're doing, but that calms the mind down, focusing on what you're doing. And, oh, what's the water taste like? I just tasted it instead of just grabbing it because I'm a little thirsty. You're paying attention with your mind. You're breathing this air. Your body is completely involved. And I noticed that I was no longer angry. And I went, this is good. This is good. This is actually yoga. The farm work was actually yoga itself. It was a practice. Instead of having to get into a posture, you're in, the posture is what your body is doing at that moment. And I think that is one of the reasons that certainly Mark too, I mean, talk about somebody who would get focused and hello, it's 11 o'clock, come on in, no headlamps. At one point I said, okay, no more headlamps. Because you're going to be out there until 11 o'clock at night if you have any headlamp. There had to be some rules.
So at a certain point for you, and maybe Mark, although maybe it never changed with Mark until he got sick, you didn't, being exclusively a farmer was
Yeah.
not enough for you, or constrained.
Okay. So one of the things was that I know all this Hinduism. I've been all around, India a zillion times. And, but I realized I want to have Jewish kids. What am I going to do? Okay, now what? And so a friend of Mark's who had been at Rutgers when he was teaching at Rutgers was the Hillel director. And so I asked him, what should I do? How should I get educated? And he said, well, down in Mount Airy, there are these people, Art Green and Zalman Schachter and Art Roscoe. But these guys, and Jeff Roth was a student. So I meet Jeff Roth down there because he said, go down to the Germantown Jewish Center. And, there's some good rabbis there. And, I don't even know if it was called Jewish Renewal at that time. But when I got to, I went to the first service there and I went, wow, I'm home. Okay, this is good. This is definitively good. And I went down there the one time, but then I said to Mark, listen, I'm here. It's so monochrome, what we do. I am taking Saturday mornings off and I'm going down to Germantown Jewish Center to services. Basically I could see the roiling inside, but he knew to keep his mouth shut because he owed me. He owed me some time out. And if there's, basically because farming is 24/7. It's actually, 48,
And
14.
you took that all the way when the kids were in school to actually being directly involved in teaching.
Well, the thing was, at a certain point, you have your kids. Do you want them to be bar mitzvah? They're not going down to the Germantown Jewish Center. What are you going to do? And I forget which of those rabbis. I said, what am I going to do? And I think it was Alman. And he said, you do it. I said, "Hmm?" And then it was, well, I can teach them Hebrew, the letters and to read and to learn some of the prayers. And I can teach, and I can teach some Jewish history. And basically, so I started to teach a little cheder at Buckingham Friends School because they couldn't go, I couldn't line up the time with the schooling and all that stuff to go to a Hebrew school, a regular Hebrew school. And so basically he said, you do it. Okay, I'll do it. So I started teaching, and at BFS, one class after school, and there were only like 4 Jewish kids, and Jesse wasn't even in the school yet. And one of the people who had their kids there was Jane and Bob Toll. And Rachel was part of the group, and then Jacob when he got a little older. And at a certain point, it's like, well, I can't prepare people for bar bat mitzvah. So Bob Toll, part of the synagogue in Elkins Park, what's the name of that synagogue?
The Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yeah, the Frank Lloyd Wright. He was a member there. And Rabbi Lieberman was the assistant rabbi, and he paid for Rabbi Lieberman to come and co-teach with me. It's great. Rabbi Lieberman knew the whole Torah by heart. I mean, he could listen to a kid review his Haftorah and be sort of like this and go, you know, like correct them. But such a great human being. And so when there was a kid that needed some prep for, I would teach the rest of them. And sometimes we teach together the whole thing. So that went on for quite a number of years.
So that's a pretty cool arc to your whole experience.
Yeah.
And we're like pressing it on time. What if I asked you right now, are you still having spiritual musings? And
Well,
what are they in this moment?
well, here we are.
Here we are.
Kind of miraculous, right? I mean, it's almost like I don't know what to say.
All the
It's
pathways to
all
get
the
in here?
pathways to get for all of us, all the interwoven stuff. I mean, you know, there's this wonderful yoga posture where you're sort of all wrapped. And I feel like that's, okay, a tree of life, but we're all wrapped up together. But each thread is so diverse. All of us are wound up together, and it's so diverse and with such amazing experiences to bring us here right now. And what I like to do is whatever it takes to be here now, in whatever time, whether it's out picking weeds or drinking water or yakking with my buddy and, you know, sharing with all of you guys. I mean, here now.
You know,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, thank you so much,
You're
Judy.
so welcome.
And we have some time for some questions. Anybody?
Yeah.
So through all of these spiritual experiences, whether you realize them or not at the time, were you searching? Like, because clearly you find yourself as an intellectual, and so you're living in that analytical intellectual head.
Yeah. Yes.
Did you notice there was a lack? Did you realize you were missing something, or did it just sort of all at different points?
I, well, the thing is,
Judy,
yeah.
let David repeat.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So over the course of all of this, were you aware that you were searching, that this wasn't just haphazard or accidental stuff, but that there was some deliberation?
I knew that what I wanted, you know, which was everything, you know, the answer to everything. I knew that, but I didn't define it as a search until getting involved with things like yoga, because then that there's a definition, you know, oh, the seeker. And oh, yeah. And then actually a friend of mine, Swami Shantanand, at one time when I said something about it, and he's kind of looked at me and said, "You're still a seeker? You haven't found yet?" But I liked him saying that, because you can get stuck. You can get stuck in that definition, but who's the seeker? The seeker is the mind, the heart, and what you define as yourself. But the real self, the thing that you're seeking, is that light that shines on your mind, that lights up the mind. The thing that if I were to pinch you, all your so here's the thing. I'm pinching you. Where did your attention just go? Right there, right? Beam of attention. So we've got this beam of attention, and it's on, you know, what's being said or whatever, or like maybe enough already, Judy, whatever your mind is saying, but you've got a beam of attention. And then if you can learn to detach that beam of attention, turn it around, pull it back on itself to observe, because it's a beam of attention observing, pull the observation back to the source of the beam of attention, the light at the source of the beam, and then hold it there as long as you can. And so basically, you know, I can uncover that beam, and I kvetched to Swami Dayananda, "I can't hold it long." And he answered me, "Practice."
Any others?
Yeah,
Are you still farming?
sort of. Tending the farm now. This is the first year that I won't be selling anything. And to keep my farmland taxes, I have to sell a certain amount. However, there is someone who is going to be buying one of the greenhouses and take it to his place. Thank you, Farm Angel. Dave, you can, you sell the stuff. So I will make some income over the next year or maybe even the next 2 years, enough to give me enough credit so that I can lower my taxes. But, and I'm mowing.
Do we have the
And-
mowing picture?
Oh, yeah. This is one of the most fun things on the planet to do. It's
It is.
no, I mean, it's really this. If you're going to, yeah. And that's the little mower. Yeah. That a 0-turn mower. Oh, it's so much fun. It is so much fun. Yeah.
Okay.
We had a farm laborer, I live down the street, so I would gladly help you out.
What would you like to do? We'll talk.
I mean, I could do.
She wants to know. I mean,
For real.
yeah, she's for real. She wants to know. You think you could?
Yeah.
We'll see what else we'll give you before you mow. But you know. Thank you. Thanks, really.
Make sure that insurance is up to date too.
Oh.
No more tomatoes?
Huh?
The tomatoes are gone?
Oh. God. The Sicilian plums. Okay, we have been known to grow the best tomatoes on the planet. Okay, amongst the best tomatoes, Sicilian plum tomatoes, which we took the seeds, smuggled them in a medicine bottle, some medicine, and we smuggled in, dried the seeds, Sicilian plum tomatoes, and saved them every year. They're the best tasting tomato in the world. You can peel them without blanching them. And they have very few seeds. But they had kind of a point. So we saved all the biggest and the roundest ones. There was actually 1 4-pound tomato. And basically we had chefs saying, in February, one chef said, when are Sicilians going to be here? I'm like, have you noticed it's snowing out and we don't live in Sicily? But the last ones I grew they died and stuff. So I'll try to grow some more next year. But I saved the seeds and no one's saving the seeds anymore.
They're valuable, even though they're
Actually-
contraband, but they're valuable.
They're no longer contraband. Yeah, the best.
Okay,
Yeah,
any others?
yeah.
Soon, what else are you growing?
Basically, I'm tending the plants that are growing there. So there's some wild greens that come up and I know which ones the wild greens.
Rutabaga,
No,
that's gone.
no. There's stinging nettle, but I haven't really cooked a lot of that this year. But certain wild greens, there's some herbs. So if I want some thyme or I want some rosemary, I do have some rosemary in the greenhouse. Basically just stuff that comes up. And I have a few tomato, there'll be a few tomato plants and greens, but not too much else. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, buddy. Yeah. Well, thanks for being interested in this.